So the next part of your lab report is going to be the procedure. So with the procedure, it doesn't need to be on its own separate page. It would simply just follow the introduction, but you would have procedure in bold and then you would write up your procedure. Before you can write your procedure, you're going to have to watch the video I've posted in D2L on how to do a Kirby-Bauer antibiotic susceptibility test. After watching that video and thoroughly taking notes throughout the video, you're going to draft a procedure on how to do this test. When you write your procedure, it does need to be written in enough detail that if a complete stranger came in, they could read your procedure and duplicate the test to get the same results that you did. So make sure you do write it in detail. It also needs to be written in past tense and it should not contain any personalization. So you don't want to use terms like I or we or us or anything. So you wouldn't write, I conducted a Kirby-Bauer susceptibility test. You would say, a Kirby-Bauer susceptibility test was conducted. So it needs to be in past tense without any type of personalization. And again, it does need to be written in detail. So you need to tell the reader things like what plates were used, what bacteria was used, what antibiotics were used, as well as dosages, incubation temperatures and time, just really all information that's present within the procedure. And it should be written in paragraph form. You don't want to write it as a list of steps, like step 1 do this, step 2 do this. So it needs to be written in detail, past tense, in paragraph form without any types of personalization. But to actually write it, you do again need to watch that video that actually goes through the procedure before you're going to be able to write up the actual procedure. So the next part of your paper is going to be the results section. So after the procedure, you would have results in bold and then you would write up your results. So results are pretty brief actually. You're going to have a paragraph section for your results where you would just state your actual results. You do not need to explain them. That's what the discussion section's for. So the results section, it typically might just be 2 or 3 sentences. It's actually pretty short, where you would just tell the reader what the measurements are for your zones of inhibition, whether they're 0 millimeters or 15 millimeters, 30 millimeters, whatever, for each of the 4 antibiotics. So you should have an actual paragraph section for your results, and then you actually have to need a chart that coincides with this. It's up to you how you want to actually draft your chart. But your chart should have information like the names of the antibiotics, the zones of inhibition for the measurements, whether the bacteria were susceptible or resistant to those antibiotics based on those zones of inhibition. And if you remember, just from kind of briefly looking at that template in APA format, the chart actually goes on the very last page of the paper. So you would have your results section where you would have your written results section, but your actual chart would not pop up until the very end of the paper, actually after your references. You would need to have a title for your chart, and then you would actually have your chart with that information that I just stated that I would like present. Also, in your written section of your results, you need to tell the reader that there is an actual chart present. So maybe in your results section, you could say something like, as seen in figure 1, the zones of inhibition for penicillin were whatever, trimethoprim whatever, and then, the additional antibiotics. But then you wouldn't actually have your chart present until the very end of the paper. The next section is the discussion. So you obviously, again, discussion in bold, and then you would have your discussion. So this is where you need to actually go through and explain your results. So I did kind of put some questions here to kind of guide you as you go through and explain your results. So you need to mention, was your hypothesis supported or not? In your introduction, you stated your hypothesis, whether you kind of what you thought was going to happen. So you need to go through and you need to tell the reader, was your hypothesis supported? Did exactly what you thought would happen actually happen? Or was it not supported if something did not didn't kind of match up? Then you need to go through and talk about what antibiotics was your bacterial species susceptible to. So what antibiotics were effective and what antibiotics were not effective. Then you need to go through and talk about mechanism of action. So for any antibiotic that your bacteria was susceptible to, so for any antibiotic that actually worked, you need to tell the reader, how does that antibiotic work? What does that antibiotic do to actually kill the bacteria or inhibit the bacterial growth? So you need to, again, do that for any antibiotics that actually worked. And again, that information can be found within your lab PowerPoints. Also, for any of the antibiotics that were resistant, I need to know, what are the bacteria doing to overcome the effects of that antibiotic? So how are they becoming resistant to the antibiotic? That again needs to be done for any of the bacteria or any of the antibiotics that the bacteria were resistant to. So if you kind of go through and follow these questions, these guidelines for your discussion, you should be fine kind of drafting your discussion. You also need to have a reference page. So you are required to have at least 5 references. You can certainly have more if you want to, but as far as your 5 references, you're going to have the NCBI website as one because that's how you're getting your taxonomy. You also need to have Bergies as one because that's how you're going to be getting an abundance of your research information for your introduction. That leaves you with 3 additional ones. The librarian kind of walks you through how to use the library databases, but I do want you to use the library databases to find 3 research articles for this paper. Now, where you incorporate that information is entirely up to you. If you use the databases to find information on, antibiotic resistance or susceptibility, maybe you can put that information in the discussion, or maybe you use the databases to find information on additional characteristics of your bacteria. You can put that information in your introduction. Entirely up to you where you want to put that additional information, but you do have to have 3 kind of credible, valid research articles from the databases to incorporate into your paper. There's some recommended references here. Again, these are just kind of the things I was already talking about. This is the link to the LibGuide, which I have posted in D2L, and that's how you get to the databases to do your actual research for your additional sources. Also, the NCBI website and some information on Bergies as well. Obviously, you do not want to plagiarize the paper. You need to write your own paper, and it needs to be written in your own words. So when you look up additional research information, you still need to put that information in your own words and then cite it both in text and in your reference page. When you submit your paper into the D2L Dropbox on July 19th, it does get put through a system called Turnitin that checks for plagiarism. So you should automatically receive a certain percentage of plagiarism. And then based on that, I kind of decide if it needs to be looked into further or not. But just make sure you're putting everything into your own words and you're citing both in text and on the reference page in APA format. As far as turning it in, like I said, you'll be turning it into the D2L Dropbox. You'll turn in an electronic copy through a Word document that I will then grade, and that is due on July 19th. As far as like the layout of the paper, like I said, I just recommend that you use that template because everything's already done for you and you really don't have to mess with anything. It already has the appropriate line spacing and font size and font actual type and margins and everything. As far as the actual length of the paper, there's not a specific number that I'm looking for. I've seen really great pages written in, really great reports written in 5 pages. I've seen really great reports written in 8 pages. Really, don't worry so much about the actual page number. I'm more concerned about the content in the actual page or in the actual paper rather than the page number. You'll find that you're going to get at least 4 or 5 pages really, really easy. Most students usually end up somewhere between 5 to 7 pages. But again, as long as the core information is there, you're fine. So don't get so caught up in the actual page number. I've also added to our course the actual rubric. So you may want to look at this when you go through and actually work on your paper. Ideally, if you can give yourself 3s in each section, there's a good chance that I can give you 3s in each section and you'll do really well on the paper. So just kind of make sure that you're looking through the rubric so that you know what I'm going to be grading you on as you work on your lab report.